So just a little thing, but I'm quite excited about it. This is my Calamansi, my citrus, I think Citrofortunella mitis, I think is the botanical name for it. It's a miniature citrus tree that has these little sour oranges on it, otherwise known as Calamansi. I picked all of the fruits off of this when I made my sisig recipe recently, and for the first time ever in my life, I've succeeded in keeping a citrus tree alive long enough that it's got some new growth on it, and there's a flower opening just right there. I'm quite excited about that, really, because I've tried growing citrus plants on the windowsill before and never really succeeded very well with them, but this one seems to be doing okay. I've got it in actually azalea compost here, which is quite acidic, and I'm watering it only with rainwater, which I keep in this old teapot here. So no hard water from the taps, and it's in acidic compost, and it seems to be doing rather well. I've got these ginkgo fruits. In a previous random stuff video, I tasted the nuts inside ginkgo fruits. These are a couple more fruits. I'm going to try growing these, and so what I'm going to actually do here is just squish these to get this, to get the seed out of the fruit, like that. I'll flip it over here, and this is a kind of lazy stratification method. I'm just pushing it into the soil here. Now, I don't know what the criteria are for breaking dormancy on these seeds. It might be that ginkgo ideally needs to pass through the gut of some extinct animal, because this is quite an ancient plant. In fact, it is a botanical curiosity, just because it's a plant that's kind of set apart from nearly every other plant. I'm just going to put a marker in there just to remind me that there is some seed there. If those germinate, so this is a kind of lazy method, so normally you'd do this in a pot, but I can't be bothered, so I'm just doing it here in the edge of the herb patch. If some ginkgo seedlings come up there next spring, I will carefully uproot them and pot them up. But yeah, ginkgo's a botanical curiosity. It is a plant that's far separated from most of the rest of the plant kingdom. It's, I think, most closely related to conifers, but obviously it's not very much like anything that we would call a conifer. It's got some weird things in the reproduction, unlike a lot of other plants where when the pollen lands on the female reproductive part of the plant, it produces a little tube that burrows down into the ovary and fertilizes the ovum inside the plant, which becomes the seed. Instead of that, apparently when the pollen of ginkgos lands on the reproductive part of the plant, it releases a sperm which swim to the ovary. So that's how weird it is. Happy to see my Japanese quince is flowering here. Hopefully we might get some quince fruits on there this year, and maybe make some jelly or something. I've also been given 3 blackcurrant plants, so I'm going to plant these somewhere up in the kind of in the food forest up there near the raspberries. I've got a red currant to plant as well, so up in that corner of the woodland up there we're going to try to grow a little food forest and establish some native, because red currants, black currants, raspberries, they're all native fruits, so we're going to try and get them established up there and see if we can maybe pick a few berries, but also it's mainly just to have them there, and I'm sure the wildlife will greatly appreciate them. So today we have 3 blackcurrant plants to plant. These were given to me by a friend who's taken cuttings of his blackcurrants, so we've got those. I've also bought a red currant that I just got in a garden centre or a supermarket or something. Now, our intention is not to try too hard to cultivate these. We're going to plant them in the woods and let them naturalise. I don't think the soil here would need very much preparation, because it's already a kind of rich forest soil full of decaying organic materials. So yeah, I'm going to have to cut that pot off of there though. Get that in there. Backfill, and then we'll water it. Let's backfill that soil. Okay. So yeah, we'll just encircle that with stones, just so we remember that's the thing we planted. So that's my 4 currant bushes. Blackcurrant, 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 red currant. Now we're just going to give these a puddle in. This will serve to settle the soil around the roots. I did heel them in, so they are pressed down against the soil, but a little bit of water will just help to wash down the soil and fill up any voids I might have left. Also, it will just give the plants a chance to have a drink and perhaps put in a little bit of root growth before things get really cold in the winter. They shouldn't need any additional watering through the winter because, you know, winter in Britain is typically quite wet anyway, but I'll keep an eye on them. And we will follow the progress of these young plants over the course of the next year or two. Now you may be wondering, is this the right place to plant these? Well, maybe, maybe not. This is kind of dappled shade here, so this is about the right kind of woodland habitat for these kind of plants. Red currants certainly are a woodland understory plant, so, and black currants not quite so much, but they still are a woodland edge plant. So this is dappled shade here. You know, other things like elder and of course brambles, nettles and ubiquitous periwinkle do okay here. So there is sufficient light for plant growth here. Okay, well, despite it being the 25th of November, there are still some tomatoes to pick. In fact, I think we'll get and pick these now because the plants themselves are looking a little bit sad. You can probably hear a loud noise in the background. There is some serious tree surgery going on. You know, autumn, winter being the season for that kind of thing. Anyway, we got loads of lovely tomatoes here. I'm going to, again, pick pretty much anything that's showing any blush of colour. Which is a lot of them now, actually. This bunch fell off and I hung it up on the cane there, so I think we'll have the whole of that bunch. We've got a couple of marmande here, which are colouring up. In fact, all of these I think are good to go now. Once they start to turn, they ripen a lot more readily off the plant. If you pick them green, they don't always ripen. They sometimes dry out before they ripen. But if you pick them once they're just starting to show that little bit of colour, they do ripen pretty reliably off the plant. This will probably be the last little picking of tomatoes, and then I'll clear these plants away, get the greenhouse wiped down and sanitised. There are some tomatoes over here that are ripening on this completely dead plant. I think we might have these as well, but I'll probably cook these. That I might just not bother with. And there are, look, some tiny little berry tomatoes. This is just where the plant is just desperately trying to continue to reproduce. That one I think deserves to be tasted. Really sweet. There's another one. Really sweet, really tomatoey. I think I might actually grow one of those tiny mini berry tomato varieties next year. Anyway, yeah, considering we're at the 25th of November, that's not bad, is it? Time for the comment positivity section. And Happy New Year. And Happy New Shirt. This is the latest in the range of shirts that Jenny's made for me from the duvet cover. Pattern matching on the pocket on this one is not exact because the pattern is so busy and small, but also because the pattern, the repeat, is quite large, so we would have wasted a lot of fabric if we tried to go for an exact match on the pattern on the pockets there. But I don't think it really matters because it's so busy. Anyway, do let me know what you think of the new shirt. I am tending towards the floral designs now. In the past it's been geometric patterns, but I'm kind of enjoying florals right now. Time for the comments anyway. First comment, do you still do wood carving or whittling? Because I remember seeing you make a walking stick with a spoon on it, but I haven't seen anything else. It has been a while since I've done any wood carving or anything like that, but I am in need of a new spatula in the kitchen, so I think there might be an axe carving or woodworking project coming up. Also, the pans, you remember I replaced a handle on a saucepan a few years ago. You may not remember, but anyway, here's the video if you're interested in that. The rest of the pans in that set also need new handles, so I might be doing some of that soon as well. Next comment, 1053, escaping insect. This was on the teardown video, so let's just go and have a look at that clip. I'm expecting then that we might find discrete components on here. So rather than just finding a circuit board with an epoxy blob on it and a single chip that drives everything, we might find, I don't know, maybe some kind of microcontroller, maybe it might not even be electronic sound effects. So some tiny little escaping, I think that might actually be a spider. Comment here on a really old video about where I germinated and tried to sprout dandelion seeds to grow microgreens, and somebody said, now I'm wondering about germinating them and then moving them into the dark. So the problem I had is if I tried to germinate them in the dark, they just didn't grow because they needed the light, and if I grew them in the light, they turned a little bit bitter. The idea was to try and grow them in the dark because it would blanch them and hopefully make them a bit sweeter. But that's a really good suggestion. It completely escaped me. Obvious now you've said it, but that's a really good idea, actually, germinating them in the light, and as soon as they start sprouting, move them into the dark. A really good idea. Like I say, obvious once you think of it, but I didn't think of that, so thank you. I might give that a try this year. So just a recap really on the Advent calendar series that I did recently. So many warm and appreciative comments for various bits of that series or for the whole series itself. Lots of people just enjoying the content. I am so glad that it was good for people. Far too many comments for me to read, but here are a few of the various appreciative comments on screen while I've been talking. The feedback on this whole series was overwhelmingly positive, and I'm just really happy about that whole thing. Someone asked, thanks for all the daily festive content. Can we expect a breakdown in the new year? Not what it sounds like. But a spreadsheet / chart of audience reaction to each vlog throughout December. Most liked, most watched, audience performance type for type of vlog, so on and so on and so on. Well, we'll have a look at some stats. I honestly don't pay very much attention to stats and the stuff in YouTube Studio, but it looks like the total views for the whole span of the series followed a curve that I would say is somewhat typical for engagement, you know, starting high, tailing off a little bit and then leveling out, which is fine incidentally, and probably as it should be. People start watching a thing and then some people drop out because it's not for them. That's fine. I only wanted people to watch if they wanted to watch. There was maybe a slight upturn at the end of the series, and I think that was possibly because people are starting to feel more Christmassy as we get towards the end of December. People were starting to think about Christmas stuff, and so perhaps a Christmas theme was a little bit more palatable to some people. The individual videos all did okay. None of them have got meteoric view counts, or none of them went viral. Pretty consistent across the whole range, and I think that's probably because I didn't spoil the content. I didn't say what the videos were going to be about. They were just at a number as the thumbnail. Nothing really searchable to indicate what kind of video it was. So I think that probably accounts for the fact that they all got fairly similar views across the span of the time. Obviously the older videos, the first, the lower numbered ones, have got more views because some people rewatched them or some people started late and caught up. And so at the end of December, which is when this snapshot was taken, the view counts obviously on the earlier videos had more views just because they've been up longer. One thing a few people asked is, should I have put keywords in the title so that people could know what kind of video they were going to be watching? I didn't want to do that when the series was actually running, because the whole point of an advent calendar is it's a little surprise. Or as the late great Jack Skellington would say, "What's in it? What's in it?" The point of the thing, not to know. However, at the end of the series, somebody commented, "I really liked your advent calendar series, but now that I was searching for this exact one for the potato part, I had to watch through 17 video intros to get to the one I was looking for. So now that Christmas is over and the joy of discovering what's behind today's door does not work as well anymore, it'd be nice to have anything in the thumbnail or title to recognise the videos I've already watched. Hope you all have a happy new year." Well, you too. And I was initially resistant to this idea because I thought, well, maybe next year somebody might want to watch the series again and they might want it as a surprise again. But I think it does actually make sense to put some keywords in the title so people can find them if they want to rewatch them. So I've done that now. And so this is what they look like. They've got 1 or 2 or 3 words in the end of the title just to indicate what kind of thing happens in the video. I hope that helps. A lot of people were quite concerned about the production overhead burden for this series, and thank you for thinking of me. I really do appreciate it. It was a task that slightly exceeded my expectations for the amount of work that I had to put into it, but it was still manageable, mainly because I didn't try to record a video every day. I did some of them actually in late November, and some days I did several videos in one day. For example, we might have gone out for a walk somewhere, gathered materials to do a craft somewhere else, and we might have come back and had hot chocolate when we come back from the walk. So that's 3 video content things being recorded in one day, but then maybe 3 lots of editing the following day. 2 days work for 3 videos. But I usually say, as a rule of thumb, that for every minute of screen time, it's about an hour of production work in the background. That is just, in planning, writing, recording, editing, and other production stuff. Some videos are a lot less work than that, and actually the advent calendar in particular were a little bit low effort than usual because a lot of it was just going for a walk and recording something. Needs less editing than something that's got lots of me talking to the camera, for example. But on average, the production effort that goes into a video is about an hour for every minute of runtime on the screen. Now that might seem like a weird thing, but if you think about it, there is planning obviously beforehand and sometimes scripting, and then there's recording, which never takes less than the runtime of the video because obviously the camera is running for usually longer than the duration of the video because retakes and whatnot. And then in the editing, you end up watching each clip more than once. So when you're running just to make sure that the titles are in the right place, make sure the transitions work, make sure you've done a cut or a join or anything like that in the right place, you end up watching each piece of the video 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 times, and so the production time becomes multiples of the video runtime. And then of course once the video's done, it's got to be uploaded, it's got to have narrative and tags and all of that added to it. And of course, once it's published as well, there's time I spend just, answering people's questions and whatnot. So in total, on average, as I say, 1 minute of screen time maps out to about 1 hour of production time. So in December, there were, I think it was about like 7 hours, about 400 odd minutes of screen time. That would have mapped out to 400 hours of work, but in reality it was probably more like half that because, as I say, some of the videos were just me taking a camera somewhere and walking along, talking to the camera as I go. And those things are quicker and easier to edit and require less planning and less work. Interestingly, a lot of people seem to be aware of that production overhead for the 57-minute scam baiting video I published in January. And to break that one down, so just to think about how that all came together. So the conversations with the scammers took place over the span of about 6 or 7 weeks, but obviously only taking up a few minutes each day here and there. But still, just the conversation with the scammers probably added up to several hours of looking at emails, reading them, thinking of a response, writing the response, sending it. The video itself shows clips of email conversation going back and forth. In this case, a total of about 450 little screenshot clips. And screenshotting them all and then making them screen ready, which means redacting email addresses, making sure that they format. And unfortunately, Outlook now has this banner thing that says you replied to this email, which is clutter. So I tended to edit that out as well. That took the best part of 2 days, 2 whole working days, to clip those things, edit them, make them screen ready. Then those clips have to go into a script where I write the narrative around them, which is mainly just how I will speak them on the recording, but also what I might additionally say about them in the narrative. That scripting took probably another day. Then that script has to be recorded as an audio track. And so it was about an hour-long video, but with all of the retakes and flubs and so on, that's a recording session of about 2 hours. And then to edit the audio track down, edit out all of those flubs and retakes and so on, and make it just sound all right, takes probably the rest of that working day. And then editing the actual video, which is just a slideshow if you think about it, but each one of those clips has to fly in and join the stack, and then the stack has to scroll back and so on. That's just the style of editing I've chosen to do. All of those animations have to be done by hand, keyframed by hand, because all of the clips are different size, and so you can't just apply a template transition to them because they all scale differently and things. So each one of those clips has to be keyframed to fly in at the right time, and then the stack has to be keyframed to move back, zoom out a bit, and so on. So that editing of just the slideshow of the video took about 3 working days to put together. I probably ought to think about a different way of presenting those videos, because it is very, very time consuming to put those together like that. I've probably made a bit of a burden for myself in that presentation style of the clips. So I might experiment. Next scam baiting video might look a bit different. We'll see. But yeah, if you think about it, editing and producing any video always takes multiples of the video runtime, just because it can't possibly be any shorter than the runtime, because if nothing else, you had to run a camera for that long. I'm not complaining about this, by the way. It's what I do, and it's what I choose to do. If I didn't like it, I would find something else to do. So the question is, do I get more views on my non-scam baiting videos? No, I don't really. My scam baiting videos are probably the most popular content on the channel. That and perhaps the cooking challenges, but sometimes a few other things as well. So in that sense, the scam baiting videos and the cooking challenges do serve a purpose in that they keep the channel going, but they're also the most difficult and laborious and time consuming to make. So I don't think I'd ever go all in on just making that kind of video, or else I make it into a kind of job. I don't really feel like narrowing down to any smaller set of things to do. Actually, it's more likely that I will expand and broaden the set of things that I end up doing in videos rather than narrowing it down. I know that's not what YouTube wants me to do for the algorithm and whatnot, but I'm not running this channel for the algorithm. I'm primarily running this channel because it's documenting the things I like to do anyway. Anyway, that's a lot of waffle. On with the comments. On the basket making one, which was one of the advent calendar videos, somebody said perhaps soaking the sticks for a short while would give them more flexibility. A few people did comment with suggestions along these lines. I think soaking of sticks or rods for making baskets is usually a step that's only done when those rods have been dried out, and so you soak them to make them moist and supple again, and then you can make your basket. I'm not sure it would really help with the green sticks, because I did just go and cut those sticks and made a green stick basket, which is a thing, but it's not always the best way to make a basket. It's not always the most appropriate use of any particular material. But I've kept the remainder of the dogwood stems, and I'm going to dry them out, and we'll try drying them and then soaking them to see if that makes them a little bit more pliant for making perhaps a different basket at some point in the future. There's probably more than half of the stems still left, so hopefully I can make something. Somebody asked, thank you for another great video, how long will the basket last made out of these materials? And somebody asked the same question about the wreath that we have on the front door, which was another one of the advent calendar videos. So anyway, let's go and have a look at those two things. So this is the condition of the wreath. I think it's about the 3rd of January now, so only a couple more days to go until 12th night. And it's all stood up really well. The foliage is all still green. I suppose the ivy is just starting to go over now. And the reason it's like this, obviously, is that this side of the building doesn't get any sunlight at all. The sun never falls on this face of the building. So this has been out in the cold in deep shade. I would say that these conifer needles are starting to look a little bit faded. So we could have sprayed or misted this occasionally just to keep it greener and fresher, and that certainly would have been necessary if this was on the sunny side of a building. But it's fine as it is, isn't it? So when we're done with this in a couple of days' time, these artificial berries and the ribbon and the bells will come off, and the rest of it is all just natural materials, so that'll go back into the woods and be composted or broken down just to return to the soil. The basket that I made and filled with foliage is not done quite so well. Well, the foliage hasn't anyway, and I didn't expect it to. Obviously this has been indoors in a heated room, and the foliage is quite significantly dried out. The basket itself has also dried out a bit, and the colour has gone a bit duller. It's still a deep red colour, but it's not so glossy as it was. But again, when this has served its purpose, it's all natural materials. I may actually end up eating these walnuts. Pine cones can be used for lighting the fire. And the basket itself, well, we'll see what it looks like when it's completely cured. I will either use it as a fruit bowl, or we might just put it in the shed, use it again for this kind of a decoration next year. But if it really doesn't look presentable as a basket, then again, it might just go out in the woods to return to the soil. In fact, I suppose I could probably hang that up in a tree, and Robin might use that to build a nest in. And then just to finish off, a couple of comments on the Longwood video, which was the walk that we did way back in September when we were down in Brixham on our summer holiday. One comment says, "Hey Shrimp, the beetle you found at 739 was probably not Geotrupes stercorarius, it was probably Anoplotropes stercorosus, which is the most common dung beetle species you can find in the woods, since they don't only feed on dung but also other decaying and rotting things like plant matter and mushrooms. If you ever found a beetle that looks like this one on a mushroom, it was Anoplotropes stercorosus. It's hard to visually distinguish the two species, at least I can't, based on the footage, so I can't identify this beetle with certainty." Thank you for that, and I think you're probably right, based on the statistics and the likelihood of finding that thing in that location. Interestingly, all I knew was that it was a door beetle, and of course when you search for door beetle, you get given the kind of common dung beetle as the most common search result, which is the Geotrupes species. They are, and I looked this up actually, they are incredibly similar beetles. They are distinguished, I believe, by counting the number of little spikes they've got on one segment of one pair of their legs. So yeah, I guess by description, easy mistake to make, but you're right, I think. Given the habitat we found them in and the things they're likely to be eating in the habitat, that's probably the more common one we saw there, so thank you for that. And then finally, a comment about the derelict cottage that we found, the ruins of an old stone cottage that we found in those woods. Somebody said, "Hi, love the channel, always happy to see when a new video is released. I used to be one of the rangers in Longwood a long time ago, and from what I remember, those cottages were old charcoal makers' cottages. Longwood used to be a very productive woodland for coppiced goods and charcoal." So that's interesting, and that sounds about right actually. So that big piece of woodland there, so people would have cut the trees and coppiced them. So coppicing is where you cut the tree down, you let it grow poles for a few years, and then you cut those down again. And you can continually crop each tree to take timber away from it without killing the tree. So you cut it down to a stump, it sprouts from the edges of the stump, it sprouts all these branches, they grow up. You let them grow up for several years until they're, maybe the thickness of your wrist. Cut them down and use those as wooden poles for making broom handles or fencing or all sorts of other wooden products historically. Or use that wood and convert it to charcoal, especially before coal, that is, the stuff you dig out of mines, became more prevalent in the Industrial Revolution. So pre-Industrial Revolution, charcoal would have been the way that you fired pots and bricks and tiles. And charcoal would also have generally been the heat source for working iron into implements. And so places like this woodland would be coppiced to produce a constant supply of charcoal. So you cut down the trees in one section of the wood, use all of that coppice material to make charcoal, and then the next year you cut down another section of the wood, and so you have a kind of rotation where each segment of the wood is getting cut down in turn, giving the first one a chance to recover before we get round to it again and coppice it again. Anyway, that's the end of the comments for this time, so on with the video. I wanted to set up a small home server that would be economical to run for various bits of home automation and other stuff.
The most obvious candidate device for something like that would be a Raspberry Pi, but let's see if we can do it cheaper and maybe in some ways better than that. I found this thin client PC on eBay for £20 plus £3 shipping. It's brand new in the box. Let's see what we get. There's a mains cable, this little accessory of some kind. We'll figure that out in a moment. A laptop-style power brick, an optical mouse that feels really light and cheap, but I wasn't even expecting a mouse, so I suppose that's a bonus. So under here must be the device, no instructions or documentation. First impression of the unit is that it feels quite hefty and solid. On the front here we've got 2 USB 3 ports and 1 USB 2, plus headphone and mic sockets. On the back, 2 more USB 2 ports, HDMI and 2 DisplayPort, Ethernet and the barrel jack socket for the power. On the bottom there are information and serial number and license stickers. I expected to see a hole here because I think that accessory we saw earlier is a foot or stand of some kind. It has 2 additional USB 2 ports on it and a little sort of jumper plug that I suppose has to go somewhere on the motherboard. This obviously is a new, unused machine as it still has all the films on the plastics. So let's just do a little aesthetic peel here. The side panels are this super shiny piano black plastic, which at first seems like it might be fairly resistant to fingerprints, but spoilers, it's not. Before we go any further, I'm going to open this up and see what it looks like inside. Bearing in mind, I don't have any instructions here, and it's not completely obvious how this case opens. I just set about removing every screw I could see. Fortunately, all of the screws are identical, so I didn't need to remember what goes where. There's this interesting little piece that comes off the top here, and underneath it there's a small cavity that appears to open to the inside of the case. I assume this is for some optional accessory that could be installed here. More screws underneath that, so I took them out, and this unlocked the side panels, which then slide a bit and lift off. And this reveals an access hatch for the RAM and storage, both of which look to be upgradable. Currently in there we've got 4GB of DDR3 RAM and a 64GB mSATA SSD. This also revealed the socket for that foot accessory to fit into, so I need to remove a sticker off the bottom of the device. The case itself is heavy die-cast aluminium and appears to function as part of the heat management for the processor. After undoing a few more screws, the top half of the case came off, revealing the machined aluminium heatsink for the CPU, which has a big thermal pad that makes contact with part of the case I just removed. The front plastic also comes off, although I'm not really sure why I bothered undoing this. It did reveal a sort of interesting detail though. The power switch for this thing is a touch control, not a mechanical button. Inside the case I spotted the header that the foot accessory plugs into, so let's get that installed. It just pushes into place and is held by a metal rod that both restrains it from being pulled out and also constrains the rotation to a quarter turn, so you can't damage the cable by rotating it continuously. The metal locking pin isn't threaded or anything, but once the top half of the main case goes back on, that won't be able to fall out. The cable plugs into the motherboard just there. There are a couple of other unpopulated headers for something. If anyone recognises what these might be, please do let me know in the comments, but I'll be really grateful. Anyway, now it's time to put it all back together and power it up. Oh, and those shiny panels on the side, not fingerprint resistant after all. I just set it up on the side of my desk using the supplied mouse and a cheap spare keyboard, and although I was dubious about that touch control for the main power, touching it makes a little light come on. The device is completely fanless and silent, and apart from that power light there are no other indicators on the front that it's working. It booted directly into the desktop of Windows 10 IoT Edition. This is a stripped-down version of Windows that is designed for use on things like this thin client. Software for Citrix, VMware and various other thin client working were already on there, and although this is designed to be used in a managed environment, I think it probably is possible to install some regular Windows software on it, but none of this really matters to me as I'm going to wipe this device and install Linux on it. First, we have to get into the BIOS though. Online, I found instructions saying to press the delete key on startup, but that did nothing. I tried various other things. F8 got me into a boot choice menu, but it was the escape key that got me into this screen, which is a menu for the BIOS and boot menus and other stuff. Here's what the device has to say about its own properties. It's got a quad-core Celeron processor in there with 2 MB of cache. Celerons are famously hated by a lot of the tech community for being underpowered. But I don't intend to be gaming on this device, or even running a graphical user interface most of the time, so I think it'll be fine. To answer the inevitable question, yes, I imagine it probably would run Doom, but I don't care enough to try. Anyway, I eventually managed to get it to boot from a USB stick so I could install Bunsen Linux on it. And after a bit of messing around telling the installer to take control of the UEFI key, I restarted it and booted into Linux. Success! So, all in all, this seems like a pretty nice, compact, well-built little device to use as a home server. But what can you do with something like this? I think my first use case will be to delegate initial upload of my videos to YouTube. At the moment, my workflow is something like this. I edit these videos on my desktop PC, which, because it has to handle video rendering, is a relatively high-spec computer, and as a result, it's a bit power-hungry. I upload the video to YouTube, but for some of my longer video content on my rural internet connection, that can take an hour or more. No, really, if I upload a 90-minute video that I've rendered at high bitrate because it's got gravel in it or something like that, it can take an hour or two. So at the moment, my editing PC has to stay switched on during that upload. After that, I send a copy to my NAS, which has its own script to make a cloud backup in its own time. I don't do that at the same time because the cloud upload would compete for bandwidth with the YouTube upload, and my editing PC would have to stay on for even longer. The NAS has a lot of nice features, but it can't upload to YouTube. However, I could have a scheduled action on a separate server that detects a new file appearing on the NAS and uses the YouTube API to upload it to my channel, unlisted so I can fill in the metadata myself later. Then I can turn off my editing PC and do something else while the NAS and the home server take care of the backup and upload in their own time. I might attach some additional storage to it. In the simplest form, I could just attach some USB hard drives and use those. Interestingly, the BIOS does have some pretty useful power management options for USB devices, so those disks wouldn't necessarily have to spin constantly. But I'm not really sure it needs any additional storage. The NAS exists for that purpose. One thing that is conspicuously absent is Wi-Fi. This unit just doesn't have it. Not a problem for me, as I intend to run it right next to my router, but it turns out that little accessory space at the top of the machine is probably designed to accommodate an optional Wi-Fi card. There's even a little knockout for the antenna. It doesn't look like the manufacturer of this device is interested in trading with the public though, so finding the Wi-Fi board for this might not be easy. But as I say, I don't need it anyway. That's a gigabit Ethernet port, so a wired connection will outperform Wi-Fi. So is this better than a Raspberry Pi for a home server? Well, I think that depends on a variety of factors. This was definitely cheaper, especially when you consider that it already comes with a case and power supply. I suppose, to be completely fair, I should compare it with a new old stock or second-hand Raspberry Pi with a case and power supply on eBay. It's still cheaper though. 20 quid is pretty hard to beat. A Raspberry Pi is smaller and lighter and has onboard Wi-Fi and Bluetooth and GPIO, but this has more of the conventional types of ports than an unexpanded Raspberry Pi. The devices are so different that it's hard to make any direct comparisons. Which one is best depends on what you want. Just for fun, I ran some benchmarks on it, and as you might already expect, performance is not remarkable. This was way less powerful than a lot of modern single-board computers, but it easily does what I'm going to need. And it's a robust, ready-to-deploy machine that, aside from fiddling with the OS install, needs very little tinkering. So I feel like I got value for money, and now all I need to do is do all of those things I said and put it to work. Sometime.
It's Christmas Day and we're at Seatown, except you can't really see the sea. You can see the town, but yeah, it's Christmas Day. We've come for a little walk on the beach and we're going to have Christmas lunch here. It's not going to be a big roast dinner with turkey and all the trimmings. We've already done that on a previous day. Oh, there are people swimming. Wow. Christmas Day swim at Seatown, and brave souls, and good luck to them. So yeah, tide is kind of high at the moment and going out, and we're at Seatown Beach to have our Christmas lunch. We've had our Christmas dinner already with the family on a day leading up to Christmas, so today's Christmas Day dinner is going to be a little picnic. So this is the main course for Christmas lunch. Leftover cold pizza, a little bit of salad, a little bit of vegetables and some nuts. There's more to come, and cake when we get home. But yeah, we've already done the huge indulgent roast dinner, so Christmas Day lunch today is quite a simple affair. So part two of Christmas lunch is just some crispy things, a nice ripe golden pear and a bit of chocolate. Now a lot of what Eva does probably makes a lot more sense if you imagine that the theme tune from Rhubarb, the cartoon series, is playing over and over again inside her head. Allow me to demonstrate. So it's a nice calm day here at Seatown this morning, Christmas morning. There's been some cliff falls, as is normal for this place. I thought we might have a little wander along the foot of the cliff, being mindful of things that might still be waiting to fall down. I thought we might just have a wander along the bottom of the cliff and see if there's anything interesting emerging from the mud. We might get lucky. This formation is, I believe, Timorage clay, which does contain fossils of ammonites, nautiloids, belemnites, sometimes ichthyosaurs. Yeah, you might just steer a little bit clear of the big looming bits. Now don't go on there either. And like I always say when we come here, it's important to recognise that this is a landscape that's on the move. So this big blob of mud here has washed out of this cliff relatively recently. This loose material here has fallen down off that cliff face probably within the last few days or so, or at least some of it has. It's important to try to make sure that you're not underneath it when that happens. So I'm not going to go and get myself in a massive mess on Christmas Day burrowing around in this mud, but there are doubtless some fossils underneath that lot to be discovered. Braver souls than I can go and do that, or wait for the weather and the elements to wash away all the fines from here and leave the solid pieces behind. And so the fossils, the sea does sometimes come all the way up here to the cliff face, and so these fossils, any fossils that are left here, will find themselves washed out, separated and deposited on the foreshore. And you can get an idea for how recent this cliff fall is just by virtue of the fact that there are pieces of the cliff top that are now down on the beach. So yes, entire sections of gorse there, and what looks like maybe some blackthorn. Big chunk of the cliff top has just slid down as one unit. Further along I can see trees, whole trees that have come down. A rather fascinating bit of well-worn driftwood there. That looks like it would be lovely if we could get that home and use that as a sculptural piece in the garden. So this is the root, it looks like, of a tree that's maybe been cut off actually and then dumped. It looks like this has been washed in the sea because it's all worn here. So this has definitely taken some wear. This is a burr or a burl where there's been a contorted growth of timber on less sea-worn specimens than this. This kind of timber is quite prized for wood turning and stuff. Oh, somebody's left an ammonite, rather poor quality ammonite fossil on the top of that stump. I don't imagine that got there naturally. But yeah, what a lovely, what an amazing piece of timber. And yes, I would love to take that home, put it in the garden, grow some plants around it. I don't suppose even two of us could lift that, and anyway, it's not mine to take. So I think we're the only ones on this end of the beach. It being Christmas Day, there were quite a few hardy souls down the other end having their Christmas Day swim. Lunatics, but good luck and bless them. Oh, Eva, come here then. Quite strange to be here when it's as foggy as this and we can't see the end of the beach yet. The end of the beach is probably just beyond where the fog obscures it, but at the moment you can't see that. Here's a piece of belemnite. This is a belemnite fossil. This is only just very recently washed out of the cliff, because you can tell there's very little weathering on the end, maybe a little bit just there, but this doesn't look like it's been tumbled for very long. What's interesting here is you've got pyrite crystals in the tail end of it. Fool's gold. Of course, that's quite a common mineral to find here, but that's the first time I've seen it in association with a belemnite. I'm not going to keep that because I've got plenty of belemnites already. That's not an intact specimen, and the fool's gold often sort of crumbles and corrodes away and turns into and produces kind of sulfur dioxide and all sorts of smelly gases as it decomposes, because it's iron sulfide. Anyway, we'll keep on looking along. So I think we're almost as far along as Golden Cap now. So I think this is the beginning of Golden Cap. It does go to show you that Golden Cap is not going to be here forever. It is going to erode away. You can see big cracks in the face of the rock there. I'm not getting underneath this bit, for example, even though there's probably some quite interesting things to find. So things, what might be fossils, nodules like that, when you find them buried in the shale here like that, a lot of people like to dig them out, split them in half. Sometimes you find an interesting fossil in there, sometimes it's just a nodule that formed around some tiny piece of impurity. You can see more nodules up there sticking out of the face of the cliff. In fact, I can see fossils sticking out of the face of the cliff up there, but there's not a chance of me getting up there to pick or observe them. I can see a piece of ammonite there, but very poor condition. The preservation of fossils is quite variable here, depending on which strata they're in, which often maps out to which species they are, because these formations were laid down over quite a long geologic period, and so different species kind of rose and declined in the seas where these sediments were originally laid down over a huge span of time, and so you get in different layers you get different species of ammonite or different fossils. So here we get to see very large blocks, very recently fallen out. You can just actually see from the fact that the cleavage on these rocks is really fresh. These have probably fallen down in the last few days, weeks at the most. And also because there is no sign of humans chipping away at them. Big blocks like this, people will tend to break up to see if there's anything interesting inside, and sometimes there is. But yeah, that huge chunk there has just tumbled down. There's some more to come down, so we won't linger here too long. But yeah, just look how fresh the cleavage is on this rock here. That's only been down a matter of days, possibly a week. Now we can see the end of the beach from here, so that's going to be our turning point. Like I say, the tide is not actually doing very much movement today at all, but it's going out at the moment. So we'll get to the end of the beach here, have one final look in the cliffs. I think maybe on the way back I will test out this thing that I keep on telling people about, which is that if you just sit here on these fine gravels and sift, you will find fossil crinoid stems. So we'll find a little patch of this fine gravel and just sit down, or squat maybe, and then we'll just sift through, see what we find. Right, this looks as good a place as any to test out what I've told you. So let's just go down here and have a little sift. Might need to keep Eva distracted with a stone. Oh, you've got one. Okay. Well, I'll keep another one here just in case. So yeah, all we need to do is just brush back the gravel in layers like this, and then have a little look. And what we're looking for is objects that are longer than they are wide. There's quite a lot of these pieces of lime bay agate here. I thought I saw a piece of sea glass there. Very easy to lose things actually, so you're almost just moving the thinnest layer of gravel on the top here, because it's really easy to just glimpse something just as you're covering it up. Well, nothing much at this spot, so we'll try again a bit further along. There's plenty more beach, and I'm falling behind Jenny now, so I'll do a catch up, then we'll have another go. So that may be as far as we come, or as close as we come to finding an ammonite today. I think that's a piece of an ammonite that's been quite worn and squished. Not keeping that one. So when we got here, the tide is about as high as it's going today. And so now it's just gradually on the decline. But it's quite strange being here on such a foggy day as this. The sea is mostly calm, but every now and again a big wave comes in. So this bit of beach I'm standing on here is wet for that reason. I will probably just back off a tiny bit. Just picked up another tumbled section of belemnite, quite a big one actually, sort of a whopper. I shan't keep this, but I think what I'll do is I'll wait till we get to that tree stump we saw earlier, and I'll leave that on top of there for someone else to evaluate and decide if they want to add it to their collection. Oh yeah, Jenny's found a very worn section of ammonite. Oh, you got something else in your pocket? Oh, okay, that's a nice piece. Do you want that one?
No.
I'll leave it on that tree stump when we get there then. Somebody else might want it. Yeah, the sea is very strange today because for the most part it's really gentle and undulating, and then every now and again a big wave comes in and makes a tremendous slap on the beach like that, only sometimes bigger. That's a piece of the lime bay agate, similar to what you've seen me tumble in one of the advent calendar videos where I looked at tumbled rocks. Oh, there's a section of ammonite, look. There we go. Kind of looks like an elephant's trunk. Again, not sure I'll keep that. No, I'm not throwing it. It's not for you, you lunatic. Yeah, I'm not sure I'll keep that because I've got plenty of pieces like that in my collection already. So we will deposit that on the worn stump. I'm just going to leave the camera running so that we can try and catch one of these big waves when they come in. A piece of belemnite. Yeah, you can see it's coming quite a way there. But as I say, the tide is now falling, so we're not in danger of being cut off here, which is always something to be aware of when you're visiting a beach that's got enormous cliffs at the back of it. Walking along here, every now and again I can hear little tumbles of smaller rocks falling down and pieces of clay and sediment and whatnot. I saved my pair for the walk back along the beach. Oh wow. That is just perfect. So I'm just going to have a little sift in these fine gravels here and see if I can find my crinoid stem fossil. So again, we'll just have a little brush through the surface gravels like this, looking for anything that's cylindrical in shape really, or approximately cylindrical. Of course you do get bits of stick in here, which can be a red herring. Like that. That's a piece of seaweed, I think. Maybe I'm not going to be lucky today, but in the past, just sitting here while others catch up with my rapid consumption of picnic foods and sifting through the gravels just like this, I have in the past found numerous crinoid stems, but perhaps it's one of those things where you need to be in exactly the right place. That's not a piece, I thought it might have been. And maybe I'm not in exactly the right place today. Oh, I'll have one more go. Oh gosh, that wasn't easy getting up. I'll have one more go along there by those rocks, and then we'll call it a day, I think. So, slightly finer gravels here, which might mean nothing at all, or it might just mean that the things we're looking for will stand out that little bit better. I mean, even if we don't find anything, there is something quite pleasing about the process of just sifting through layer after layer of these, I mean, they're mostly brown, but quite pretty gravels. It's interesting to think that, you know, what if human aesthetics had been different to what they are, and what if we'd thought that brown was a beautiful colour for gemstones instead of blue and green and red and you know, kind of primary or spectral colours. What if we thought, wow, you know, I would love a brown gem for to be set in my ring. There you go. That is probably a piece of crinoid stem, but it's very worn down. But yeah, what if grey and brown and colours like that had been the things that we treasure? Of course, it probably wouldn't be, because the reason we don't is they are very, very common, whereas brightly coloured things, not so much. But it's an interesting thought experiment. You know, what if all of these things were jewels to some people? What if aliens landed on our planet and from a place where perhaps all of their naturally occurring minerals are brightly coloured? What would they think of me just casually sifting through this pile of brown gems, priceless brown gems? Okay, I'm going to stop now because I'm getting cold, and also I want to go home and have some cake. So thanks for joining us on our Christmas Day walk here at Seatown. I hope that's been interesting. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you again soon.